born of some genetic predisposition for savagery. My brother took offense at that, despite not having any knowledge to disprove the assertion. He was only 11, and the seed of evil could very well be within him. I think that upset him more than the actual murder. The chance that he could one day carry out a similar act of diabolicism. My birthday's in 2 days. Remember how I said I could very well believe my father had done such terrible things? Last year on my birthday, my father was late to my birthday party. He and my mom argued, and in my desire to have a birthday party not ruined by fighting, I tried to break up the argument. My obviously drunk father pushed me, and I fell down our stairs, fracturing my spine. I was rendered permanently handicapped. My mother, hoping to preserve the family unit, reported the incident as an accident, that I had fallen while excitedly running up the stairs to retrieve a present. I didn't deny the story, only because I wanted to believe it was just an accident, that he hadn't truly meant to push me with such force. Whether my father's recent actions were born of immense guilt or the sick joke of a twisted mind, I can't say because I don't know. He won't speak to anyone, and from what I've heard during my mother's phone calls with authorities, he won't be allowed back to civilization for quite some time, if ever. We plan on moving soon. I don't know if it'll be another small town, but I don't think it'll matter anymore. Even the smallest, most remote place can have crimes as awful as those in any big city. What keeps me up at night, what sends a chill through my inoperative spine, is the note that was attached to one of the poor girl's legs. It read, "Melissa, I'm sorry for what happened last year. Please forgive me. I got you some new legs, just your size. I know they're not exactly the same. Hers is a little bit less toned, but it was the best I could do. I mean, she just stumbled into the woods while I was on my walk. I didn't even call out to her or anything. I hadn't thought of what to get you for your birthday that could make up for what I did last year. And those legs? Those legs! I just knew they'd be perfect for you. Please, Melissa, understand? From Dad."
I was looking for a car to buy for my son for his 18th birthday. I was searching all the typical car websites, Cars.com, eBay Motors. They were all overpriced as expected. Craigslist was the only place to find an actual deal. About a week into my search, I found an '03 Toyota Camry. It had 67,000 miles, no accidents, no damage, and in good condition for only $3,500. This seemed such a steal for such a reliable car with such low mileage. The seller lived about 10 miles from me, which was a reasonable drive when looking for a car. I gave him a call to set up a time to come check it out. The man sounded normal on the phone. He assured me that there were absolutely no problems with the car. He introduced himself as Bob. I brought along $3,500 in cash, even though I planned on wiggling down the price as low as possible. I pulled up the dirt road to Bob's property at about 15 minutes early. It was a tiny little house with a decent sized property, only because it was a bit far from the nearest neighbors. The garage was open, so I walked over to see if anyone was inside, but except for an unusual amount of car parts, it was empty. The car was nowhere in sight. The only car on the property was an old pickup truck. I went over to the front door to check the house numbers. It was the right address. The doorbell button was missing, so I knocked on the front door. I knocked on the door for exactly 5 minutes before deciding to give the man a call. So I dialed his numbers, and I heard the sound of a cell phone ringing from inside the house. I was extremely confused at this point. Now I knew I had the right house. I didn't understand why. If he was home, why wasn't he answering? I decided I had to peek through one of his windows to see if anyone was inside. Peering through the glass, I couldn't see really much, as it was pretty dark inside the house. I saw a pretty old-fashioned dining room set, but across from that I saw someone standing at the back door of the house, staring outside. I figured that must have been Bob, so I banged on the window, but he didn't move. There was no gate or anything to the backyard, it was just a wide open yard. Since this wasn't a rural area, I simply walked around the house to the backyard. I didn't understand how he couldn't hear me. When I got to the back door, I made a shocking realization. The standing figure by the door was a taxidermied human being. I ran straight back the way I came, back to my car. I looked up one last time before driving off. The blinds to the window I had peeked in had been shut, but I could see 2 of the blinds bent open. Someone was at the window watching me. You could probably guess I had the gas pedal to the floor the whole way home. The whole situation still makes no sense. All the car parts, the fact that there was no Toyota Camry, the taxidermied human being, the fact that there was no car there leads me to believe that whoever that man wasn't planning on selling me anything. And that also leads to the disturbing thought that I was very close to becoming a lifeless statue staring out that man's back door. It was very common for me to be home alone at night, as I only lived with my dad, and his shifts would constantly shift from days to nights. This happened around the time my dad was doing the night shift. I would stay up really late on these nights watching movies. It's always taken me a long time to fall asleep, so after turning off the TV to go to sleep, I'd probably lay there for a good half hour. Then I heard a toy fall over in my toy closet. It was nothing too suspicious, but it still creeped me out. But then the doorknob on my toy closet started to wiggle, until finally unlocking the door, I hid under my covers, not making a sound. It was strangely quiet for a good 2 minutes, so I finally peeked my head out of the covers. There was a figure standing next to my bed looking down at me. I screamed at the top of my lungs and began hugging the wall behind me. The figure looked out the window, then just walked away out of the room. I stayed in that position for like an hour, before checking if he was gone. The front door was left wide open, so it seemed he had left. I didn't get a minute of sleep that night. There used to be a pond about half a mile away from my old house that I would commonly go fishing in. It was nicknamed Daryl's Pond. I still have no idea who Daryl was or why it was called that. But nobody owned it, so people would once in a blue moon go fishing there as well. It was usually me by myself though. I had dug a pole into the ground where I would tie a noose to and from my small kayak. I'd say it was about 3 in the afternoon when I rowed out to the middle of the pond, a sweet spot for getting a decent catch. There was another person coming out from the trees. I waved at him and gave him a smile. He hopped in a small boat floating by the edge of the pond and began rowing over to me. As he got close enough where trying to speak to him wasn't coming off as obnoxious, I gave him a friendly, "Perfect day, isn't it?" "Yes, absolutely," he said. He didn't say anything after that, and I started to feel a bit awkward, as if I was obligated to keep some kind of conversation rolling now. So, You come out to throw some lines? I asked. No, I don't actually fish. Oh well, it's never a bad day to just relax in the pond, I said. He continued to row closer to me until his boat collided with mine, making a huge thud. Weirded out, I was only 24 years old and this guy looked like he was in his late 40s or 50s. There was an awkward silence. I acted as if I was focusing on trying to make a catch, but by now that wasn't even on my mind. This guy was weird. I didn't know what this guy wanted and it was uncomfortable being so close to him. I felt him look at me, or at least in my general direction, as I faced halfway to the opposite direction of him. I took a quick glance at my right. Yep, he was staring at me. I decided to be ballsy and lock eye contact with him. After about 4 seconds, he looked away. So, where you from? I asked him. Up there. He pointed behind him in the direction of the woodsy hill leading past the dirt road. Oh, you live by Suffolk? I asked him. Oh, no, I'm not, he said. What made you decide to come out here? I said. Why not? I continued to try and uncomfortably fill the awkward silence that kept coming up. His responses were dry. He didn't contribute anything to what was barely a conversation. He just sat there doing nothing, with a smile on his face, looking either at me or in my general direction throughout. I was creeped out. My heart was racing at this point. I'd go as far to say I was nervous for my life. We were surrounded by trees in all directions in the middle of a pond. I started to row a bit closer to land, but in a very low-key kind of way, trying to play it off as I'm trying to find a better spot to find some fish. I was horrified when I saw he was following me. What a great day, huh? I felt the shaking in my voice. I got close enough to the edge of the pond when I finally told the man, I think I'm gonna call it a day. I turned to see his reaction. He was still staring at me, but his smile was gone now. I can't let you leave, he said. He lifted his flannel to expose a handgun sticking out of his jean pocket. As soon as I could process what I was looking at, I dove out of the boat for land, ran the whole half-mile uphill through the woods back to my house, and locked every door and window as soon as I made it home. I pulled down the blinds to the dining room window, leaving it open just a crack for peeking outside undetected. It started to get dark out, and I left all the lights off, still peeking out to the front yard, making sure I wasn't followed. The time came when I eventually decided I wasn't followed. I realize now, like you, that not calling the police immediately was a huge mistake. I kept the bedroom window open to let the room air out. My bedroom was on the second floor, so I wasn't worried about being watched through the window. About a half an hour after shutting the lights off and falling under the covers, I heard a sound of leaves crunching outside. I sat up to hear it more clearly. There was definitely somebody walking around out there. Normally, I would assume it was a deer or bear, but after what just happened, I was still on paranoia mode. I sat up as still as a statue, except for my shaking out of fear, waiting as the sound of steps stopped. Hey buddy, are you up there? Are you trying to sleep? Sorry, I didn't mean to wake you. I felt like 100 pounds just dropped directly onto my chest. It was the same voice. I knew it right away. I didn't make a sound. I crept out of the room quietly downstairs to the kitchen and grabbed the phone, practically crawling on my way out to avoid being seen through the open blinds. I called 911 like I should have earlier, in the temporary safety of my bedroom. I made sure to whisper into the phone, as I was still hoping he hadn't yet heard or spotted me. 20 minutes felt like an hour as I sat behind my bed waiting for the police to arrive in the constant fear that I would hear glass breaking from downstairs or a thud on the back door. or even just the voice again from down below my window outside. The police did a thorough investigation of the property and nearby woods, turning up nothing. They suggested I stayed with family or friends for a few days, so I did. I never heard from or saw the man again, but I still moved a month later. I couldn't deal with the constant fear and paranoia of being watched through the window. I feel more comfortable fishing out by the bay now. This happened when I was 15 years old. My best friend Anthony wanted me to come over for the night, since his parents would be gone all weekend. I rode my bike over and put it in his backyard before letting myself in through the back door. We played basically every game he had, from FIFA all the way to Call of Duty, with popcorn and other junk food spilled out all over the floor. As the night progressed, we moved to video games, to watching half a movie and getting bored, to doing prank calls at close to 10 o'clock. Anthony made a few calls to different pizza places. When it was my turn, I just dialed a few numbers in hopes to get somebody at their house. On, say, my fourth attempt, I finally reached somebody. A guy with a deep and rough voice picked up, answering with a yeah instead of a hello. Anthony's laughing in the background made me stumble with my words, mid-sentence, ultimately cracking up into laughter. I had never done a prank call, so I sucked at it. The guy on the other end was silent. I regained my straight face and tried to continue with the call. It went something like this. Sir, would it be alright if I borrowed one of your wheels off of your car? What's your name, kid? My name is Bob. Really? You sure it's not Anthony? It hit me like a brick. I looked up at Anthony, whose face was noticeably full of fear. I hung up the phone, not wanting to be on the line with whoever that was another second. Anthony, who the hell was that? I asked him. I don't know, he told me. Does your caller ID display your name or something? No, it shows my dad's name. We hopped on the computer and did some research, trying to figure out how it was possible for somebody to get your name through your phone number. It didn't make sense how he could get Anthony's name so quickly. He was way too young at the time to be on any of those personal information sharing websites. We ended up asking the question on Yahoo Answers. Since no one had a similar experience, the question turned up no answers. I suggested he call his dad, but he wasn't supposed to have anybody over for the weekend, so he didn't want to call. We planned on sleeping in the living room, so we resumed watching the movie we hadn't finished from earlier. Right after the phone call had left our mind, me and Anthony looked at each other when we heard his front storm door opening, and the doorknob began to turn. It was only able to turn about halfway before the lock restricted it. Anthony turned off the TV and went over to the window to see who it was. I spread the blinds open. There was a tall guy standing outside. He noticed the blinds moving and turned to look at me. I practically threw the blinds back into place. Me and Anthony hid in the kitchen, listening for any more noises. We heard the sound of the gate to the backyard opening, as it was right outside the kitchen window. God damn it, I said. I forgot to shut the back door. Anthony urged me to shut it. I made it to the hallway leading to the back door and froze. The silhouette of a man standing outside the back door. I don't think he noticed me, but he was surely looking into the house. He opened the door and stepped inside. I tiptoed to the kitchen and motioned for Anthony to follow me upstairs. We made it up to his room as quietly as possible, shutting the door to avoid making any noise. We crawled under his bed. He had cloth covering the bottom of his bed so you couldn't see under it unless you actually moved the cloth. The doors downstairs all opened, one getting closer to the upstairs. Thumps began up the stairs, and he was right outside the door now. The door to the room opened. I could hear Anthony's breathing. It was too loud. The footsteps moved over to the closet, and the closet opened, and I could hear the coat hangers being slid around as the fabrics of the jackets and coats rubbed against each other. The footsteps moved over to the bed and stopped. I felt my heart was about to explode out of my chest. Anthony's breathing was too loud. I had to cover his mouth with my hand. Nothing but silence in the room now. We lay still for so long. I almost thought he wasn't even in the room anymore. I moved my hand away from Anthony's mouth and whispered in his ear, "You think we can make a run for it?" He was about to answer when the most disturbing, memory-haunting scream I've ever heard filled my ears as Anthony was seemingly dragged out from under the bed. I crawled out and saw him struggling with the man. I desperately looked around his room for anything to use as a weapon. I settled with a screwdriver sitting on his nightstand. I hurried over to the man and drove the screwdriver into his back. He let go of Anthony as he let out a scream of agony, giving us time to get the hell out of the house. Running out on the road would give away our position too easily. It would take too long to get to the neighbor's house. We dove for the tree line in the woods and took cover behind a bush, watching the house. The back door opened as the man stepped outside. Looking around the backyard, he looked out to the woods. I felt his eyes passed as he scanned through the tree line. It seemed it was too dark for him to see us. Then he turned his head back in our direction. I ducked behind a bush. "Joey's coming." "What?" "Dude, get up, we gotta run." He was right, the man was approaching us fast. How could he have seen us? We ran through the woods with the leaves crunching under us, giving away our position. When Anthony tripped over something, I crouched down with him, hoping we had run far enough. Not even 20 seconds later, oncoming footsteps from the direction we were running came fast. They slowed down only 2 trees away from us. As we lay face down in the leaves, moments later, the footsteps took off in another direction. We waited until we could no longer hear them, and took off back in the direction of the house. While running over the sounds of crunching and my heavy breathing, I swear I heard leaves crunching from behind us. We made it back to his back door, into his house, and this time remembering to shut the back door. We were now able to call the police. Anthony stayed on the line with them while I patrolled the back windows, making sure nobody was out there. It was so dark though, I couldn't see anything. So I did something that seems stupid today. I turned on the backyard light, and immediately in the distance, over by the woods, I saw him standing by a big tree. He turned off back into the woods and disappeared out of sight. That was the last time me or Anthony ever saw him. I would be lying if I told you we heard the occasional knocks at our windows, or something cliché. No. That was it. 5 years had passed and nothing has happened. Do I wonder if it was somehow linked to the prank call? Maybe. Does it make any sense? Not really. But yeah, this was the story of how me and my still best friend Anthony almost died during a break-in.